e4. This is an excellent start toward developing the pieces, as lines are immediately open for the queen and a bishop. The e-pawn itself helps in the battle for the center by occupying a key square and attacking two others, d5 and f5. e6. In spite of its modest appearance, this move is just as good as the straightforward 1. e5. Black's idea is to follow up with 2. d5. Attacking white's center. He is then prepared to meet 3. e takes d5. By recapturing with the e-pawn, thus maintaining a pawn in the center. d4. Naturally, white puts another pawn in the center, now making d5 and c5 forbidden territory for black's pieces. Meanwhile, his own queen and dark-squared bishop have more freedom of movement. d5. Putting the question to the e-pawn. White has a choice of various replies. 1. 3. e takes d5. In order to simplify. 2. 3. e5. To cramp black with the pawn chain. 3. 3. Knight c3. Also. 3. Knight d2. Or, less effectively. 3. Bishop d3. To protect the pawn and develop a piece at the same time. The first method was favored by Morphy, who liked open positions that gave his pieces wide scope for attack. Nowadays it is rarely adopted, as after the exchange of pawns the positions are equal and symmetrical and an attack is difficult to whip up, unless you are a Morphy. The cramping move. 3. e5. Has a great many advocates, but the argument against this system is that white's pawn chain is rigid and susceptible to undermining tactics. Black initiates a strong counterattack on the base of the pawn chain by 3. c5. Followed by knight c6. And queen b6. When white finds himself defending a center that has lost its flexibility. There remains the third way, which is simple and consistent with common sense in chess, to support the e-pawn and bring a piece out on the scene. Knight c3. Typical Tarrasch. He selects the method which furthers his development and maintains tension in the center. This move brings a knight out, protects the e-pawn and increases the pressure on d5. d takes e4. Tarrasch disapproves of this exchange of pawns, as black surrenders the center without obtaining any compensation. If results are a measure of the merit of an opinion, Tarrasch proved his point in this match. Mieses played 3. d takes e4. 7 times with black, with the consequence that 2 games were drawn and 5 were won by Tarrasch. Knight takes e4. Now white has a beautifully centralized knight, pressure on e5 and c5, and a superior pawn position, a pawn at d4 to one at e6, which assures him greater freedom of action. Knight d7. Intending to support the g8 knight when it reaches f6. If black plays 4. Knight f6. At once, white can exchange knights by 5. Knight takes f6 check. Black's recapture either brings his queen too early into the game, or with 5. G takes f6. Allows his kingside pawn structure to be broken up. Knight f3. This is where the king's knight is most useful, so why not place it there at once? Even the greatest masters do not play startling, bizarre or brilliant moves in the opening in an effort to be different, or to impress others with their ability to find extraordinary moves in commonplace positions. They are content to develop their pieces quickly, placing them on squares where they will operate to greatest effect, and then wait for nature to take its course. When the time is ripe for combinative play, the odds are it will turn in favor of the player whose development is superior. Knight G, f6. A sound developing move. Not only does the G8 knight move to the square most suitable for its powers, but it challenges the sovereignty of White's knight and disputes its hold on the center. Bishop d3. Rather than retreat, White supports the knight by developing another piece. If Black exchanges on d4, White remains with a piece in the center. Bishop e7. The bishop is well placed at d7, and the decks are cleared for early kingside castling. 6. Knight takes e4. 7. Bishop takes e4. Knight f6. 8. Bishop d3. Is an interesting alternative, when the time lost by the bishop's retreat compensates Black for the tempo he lost when he played. 3. D takes e4. Castle kingside. The king hides behind a pawn barricade while the rook moves in toward the half-open e-file. Knight takes e4. Black exchanges to free his crowded position and let the queenside pieces get some air. Bishop takes e4. The recapture gives White a monopoly on the important squares and poses Black the problem of attaining equality. Knight f6. This is always a fine square for the knight, and in this case the knight gets there with gain of time by attacking the unprotected bishop. Bishop d3. This mobile bishop is too valuable for White to allow its exchange. Any such transaction benefits Black as a reduction in the number of pieces on the board eases the pressure on him. b6. Understandably, Black wants his light-squared bishop on the job and intends developing it at b7. There is danger, though, in attempting this before the king has castled. Not only is there the risk of a check on the a4, e8 diagonal, which might compel the king to move and forfeit his right to castle, but there is also the possibility of White planting a knight on c6, a square weakened by the advance of Black's b-pawn. Knight e5. The knight occupies a wonderful outpost and will put a restraining hand on Black's ambition to expand. Castle kingside. Black realizes that 10. Bishop b7 is refuted by 11. Bishop b5 check, to which he must respond either with 11. King f8, losing the castling privilege, or with 11. c6, giving up a pawn. Naturally, it would be silly to snatch a pawn by 10. Queen takes d4, and fall into 11. Bishop b5 check, losing the queen by a discovered attack. Knight c6. Immediately pouncing on the weakened square, with a view to removing Black's dark-squared bishop. But why give up the knight, which I said a moment ago was occupying a wonderful outpost, for a bishop that seems to have little potential? There are at least 3 good reasons. The exchange deprives Black of one of his bishops, and the mere possession of both bishops is a formidable attacking weapon, no matter how placid the position. The reduction in material increases the dynamic power of White's pair of bishops, which have more space to work in. The emptier the board, the better they can sweep the area, one operating on light and the other on dark diagonals. The third reason is rather subtle. Black's kingside position is stoutly defended by the knight, and the knight in turn by the bishop and queen. In order to get at the knight, which must eventually be destroyed for a kingside attack to succeed, white first removes one of its firm supports, the bishop. The substitution of black's queen for the bishop will make a pin on the knight a potent one which cannot easily be shaken off. Queen d6. As good as any other move the queen can make. Queen f3. A very important Zwischenzug, in-between move. It is stronger than the immediate. 12. Knight takes, e7 check. And causes black to modify his plans. Let us analyze both moves. If white plays 12. Knight takes, e7 check. Then after 12. Queen takes, e7. 13. Queen f3. White attacks the rook. The rook evades the queen by escaping to rook b8. And black's next move. 14. Bishop b7. Drives the queen off the long diagonal, leaving black's bishop in control of it. After the actual move. 12. Queen f3. Black is threatened with 13. Knight takes, e7 check. Queen takes, e7. 14. Queen takes a8. Loss of a rook. This time the rook cannot run from the queen, as the flight square, b8, is covered by white's knight. And the response. 12. Bishop b7. To interpose the bishop, meanwhile developing it on the long diagonal, fails after. 13. Knight takes, e7 check. Queen takes, e7. 14. Queen takes b7. And white wins a piece. Bishop d7. The upshot of all this is that in order to save the rook's life the bishop must be content to move to d7, where it has little scope. Knight takes, e7 check. Strategically, this represents a triumph for white. Not only does he remain with the advantage of the two bishops against black's knight and bishop, but he has also compelled black's remaining bishop to take up an unfavorable post, while white retains control of the long light-squared diagonal. Queen takes, e7. Black recaptures with the impression that his position is solid enough, though defensive in character. Bishop g5. White puts paralyzing pressure on the knight with this powerful pin. Before going any further, let's review the bidding. By doing nothing more remarkable than making simple developing moves, white has an advantage in his pair of bishops, a better all-around position, more pieces in play, and an enduring initiative. More pieces in play. Yes, his queen and both bishops are actively posted, while black's knight is unable to move, his queen must hover about the knight, or lose a pawn after. Bishop takes f6. And his bishop has little mobility, shut off as it is from the kingside by black's own e-pawn. The pawn position in the center also favors white, in that his d-pawn on the fourth rank has more to say about affairs than the enemy pawn at e6. White now plans to create a breach in the lineup of pawns screening black's king, by next playing the surprising but logical 15. Queen e4. Black could not reply. 15. Knight takes, e4. To this, as after. 16. Bishop takes, e7. Attacking two pieces. 16. Rook f, e8. 17. Bishop takes, e4. He has no time to take the e7 bishop as his a8 rook is under attack. The idea underlying. 15. Queen e4 is not to induce black to snatch the queen, but by the threat of. 16. Bishop takes f6. Queen takes f6. 17. Queen takes h7 checkmate. To compel him to play. 15. g6. The effect of this pawn move would be to loosen the defensive structure shielding the king, remove a prop from under the pinned knight, and offer white points of entry on the weakened dark squares h6 and f6, which are no longer guarded by the g-pawn. One possibility, for example, is 15. Queen e4. g6. 16. Queen h4. Attacking the knight. 16. King g7. 17. Bishop h6 check. And white wins the exchange. Rook a, c8. Black shifts the rook from the line of fire, so that 15. Queen e4. Knight takes, e4. 16. Bishop takes, e7. Rook f, e8. Retains material equality. Constructively, black intends to follow up with 15. c5. Coming to grips with white's center pawn and opening the c-file for his rook. Rook f, e1. A useful developing, restraining and preparatory move. It brings the rook out to a half-open file. It prevents any attempt by black to free himself by prying open the e-file. It makes provision for utilizing the e1 rook in a kingside attack, somewhat like this. 16. Queen h3. h6. 17. Bishop takes h6. G takes h6. 18. Queen takes h6. And the rook comes in decisively by way of e5 and g5 to inflict mate. Rook f, e8. Vacating a square for the king. Black abandons the projected. 15. c5. Against which Tarrasch intended, according to his own comments. 16. Queen h3. h6. 17. Bishop takes h6. And now. 1. 17. c4. 18. Bishop takes g7. King takes g7. 19. Queen g3 check. King h8. 20. Queen h4 check. King g7. 21. Queen g5 check. King h8. 22. Queen h6 check. Pretty zigzagging by the queen. 22. King g8. 23. Rook e5. With a quick mate. 2. 17. G takes h6. 18. Queen takes h6. C takes d4. To meet. 19. Rook e5. With. 19. Rook c5. 19. Queen g5 check. King h8. 20. Rook e4. And black must give up his queen to avoid mate. Queen h3. The winning move, although it appears that white has been playing a long string of winning moves. The pressure is now redoubled on the h-pawn, which white threatens to win either by 17. Bishop takes f6. Followed by 18. Queen takes h7 check. Or simply by taking it at once with the bishop, as black's pinned knight dare not recapture, and his king may not take the bishop. How does black defend himself against white's threats? If 16. h6. Then 17. Bishop takes h6. G takes h6. 18. Queen takes h6. Queen f8. Otherwise. 19. Rook e5. Will lead to mate. 19. Queen takes f6. When white, 2 pawns up, wins easily. If 16. g6. Saving the h-pawn but depriving the knight of any real support, white wins by 17. Queen h4. King g7. 18. Rook e4. Followed by 19. Rook f4. And the rook too hits out at the helpless knight. If 16. e5. Uncovering an attack on the queen, then 17. Bishop takes f6. Bishop takes h3. Or 17. Queen takes f6. 18. Queen takes d7. And white wins a piece. 18. Bishop takes e7. And white is a piece ahead. Finally, after 16. c5. 17. Bishop takes h7 check. King f8. 18. Bishop e4. Threatening a devastating check at h8. 18. King g8. Black is a pawn down and still on the defensive. All these variations are pleasant, especially if you are on the winning side. Queen d6. Hoping that 17. Bishop takes f6. G takes f6. 18. Queen takes h7 check. Winning a pawn will appease white. Bishop takes f6. White removes the only defender in the neighborhood of the black king, and G takes f6. Uproots the g-pawn, exposing the king. Queen h6. Holding the king fast. The idea is to keep him from escaping by way of f8 while facing him with deadly threats. The modus operandi after the text move is 19. Bishop takes h7 check. King h8. 20. Bishop g6 check. King g8. 21. Queen h7 check. King f8. 22. Queen takes f7 checkmate. If you can play this sort of move, Queen h6, you are a cut above the average player. Most young players, in a chess sense, have a tendency to try checking the king to death only to find after something like 18. Queen takes h7 check. King f8. 19. Queen h8 check. King e7. That the king has escaped and the attack is exhausted. What is worse is that white's queen and d-pawn are threatened, and that's saving both by 20. Queen h4. Let's black respond with 20. Rook h8. And suddenly white is thrown on the defensive. f5. Intercepting the bishop's line of attack. Rook e3. Obviously threatening check at g3, which would force black to give up his queen in order to avoid instant mate. Notice how the occupation of the partly open e-file by the rook enables the convenient use of e3 as a transfer point, allowing the rook to switch over to the open files on the king side. Queen takes d4. Guarding the g7 square so that after 20. Rook g3 check. King h8. White has no check there with his queen. If instead 19. f6. To try escaping with the king, then 20. Rook g3 check. King f7. 21. Queen g7 checkmate. Is mate. Or if 19. King h8. Then 20. Rook h3. Forces 20. King g8. When 21. Rook g3 check. Is fatal. c3. A beautiful coup de repose. Black is helpless. His queen dare not leave the diagonal leading to g7, and 20. Queen g7. 21. Rook g3. Pins the queen, while 20. Queen h8. Succumbs to 21. Rook g3 check. And the poor king's only flight square is occupied by his queen. This game was awarded a brilliancy prize.